1 month before moving here, on my 8th birthday, I remember wishing for one thing: to never come to Canada. Well, we all know how that turned out. Also, no reason why we should move here, why we should come to Canada. To me, my life in the Philippines was as perfect and wholesome as apple pie. The only excuse my parents had really given me was because of higher quality education. But I knew it was more than that. And of course, my parents did what parents do best. They scolded me and told me not to wish for things like that. And I never protested again. I guess a part of me also wanted to experience what it will be like to live in a place like Canada. I was exposed to North American culture at a very young age through the television. Because of this, I had developed an idea of what it would be like. Cold, safe, a place that captured a certain feeling of luxury. The services of these countries were intriguing. As a kid, innocent and oblivious of all the horrors that plagued our world, only had high hopes and thought of just that. Little did I know it was more than snowy mountains, eating pancakes with maple syrup, and saying, "What a great day it is outside, eh?" I had my first dose of reality the moment I stepped foot in Canada, because it not only opened my eyes to the rest of the good of the world, but also the bad. For the first few moments after moving here, my family immersed themselves in Canadian culture. We went to museums and learned about the Indigenous people of Canada. We went to the Vancouver Aquarium and saw animals we've never seen before. And we watched parades and attended festivals that we weren't used to seeing. But my idea of Canadian culture changed when I went back to school. Because once I had the opportunity to interact with my peers, struggles and obstacles to adapt were introduced to me. Now I understand that the root of some of these obstacles is the unconscious cultural oppression that's embedded in Canadian culture. Starting from the time Europeans had just started to settle in Canada, the idea that white people are superior have inflamed oppression in our country. Whether that is cultural, systemic, or individual, and both conscious and unconscious. This belief had led to popular opinions that I bet some of you have heard before. Like, "Go back to your country," and "They're taking over." All throughout Canada's history, we see minorities suffer. This idea had birthed racism that still exists today. In 2017, out of all police reported crimes, 43%, which is 878 crimes in total, were motivated by hatred of race or ethnicity. I have a Filipino friend who was taking part in Tag Days in Cadets. When a guy came up to his group member and said, "He shouldn't be wearing our uniform. He's not Canadian." See, some people think we're in the military. Maybe what he meant by "our" was that people of color can't serve our country. But regardless of what he thought we were, it was the impact and significance of the word "our." As if people in minority groups were any different from the rest of Canadian society. For me, though I identify as a Filipina, I also recognize that I am a Canadian citizen. Similarly, one of my Thai friends told me that when her family had just moved here from Thailand, her little brother used to get bullied all the time because of his skin color and his height. These are only some of the sheer realities non-white individuals have to face on a day-to-day basis due to the margins created by our differences. With cultural oppression at the root of these obstacles, our journey as newcomers are shaped by things like discrimination, language barriers, and being ashamed of our own culture. The margins created by racism has created a feeling of discrimination. As an immigrant, there were many times where I felt left out because I was different. There were many lunches spent alone, many moments where picking a partner was dreadful because this meant nobody will pick you, and moments where you see everyone together except for you. Because of this, some of you may know, you gain a certain longing to have friends. And when you do have them, it didn't matter if they were good people or not, because this meant it was way better than being alone. In result to discrimination, individuals miss out on experiences. With this, they can't develop or practice their social skills. Before coming here, I was the most outgoing kid in the world. Like, as bad as it sounds, I loved attention. If you asked me to dance, I danced. If you asked me to sing, I sung. I didn't care. But coming here made me shy. I was completely out of character. High school almost became a game of begging to bring myself out there, and it was hard. Most of the time it was just awkward. You know that nodding thing you do when you run out of things to say to someone, so you're just nodding and smiling at them and hoping the moment would just end? Yeah, there were a lot of those. As a kid, fitting in was a big deal because the word racism was non-existent in my limited vocabulary. I knew I was different and I had to change myself. See, some people change so they can have friends. Some unfortunately change to stop the bullying. See, the thing is, being put in a new culture feels as though you're obligated to change yourself. Because until you looked like them, acted like them, or spoke like them, you will never feel included or accepted. Because if you're anything than just that, you're different. This was a message that circulated my brain as a kid again and again. I almost became obsessive with the idea of fitting in, up to a point where I wanted to hide my own culture because I was starting to feel ashamed of it. To me then, adapting meant jumping into the melting pot. My mom used to pack me and my siblings delicious Filipino food for lunch. So basically rice and meat. But one day we had asked our mom to stop packing our lunches this way because we noticed nobody else had what we were eating. Another part to this was the lack of representation of diverse cultures around me at that time. Our differences in the way we acted had led me to believe that having things like accents and eating a different type of food were not normal. As a kid who was shy, who only knew basic English and had this accent that made talking feel excruciating and embarrassing, also didn't help with fitting in or making friends in that matter. The language barrier between me and my peers drew a harder divide. I remember there will be times when I'll be speaking English, but unconsciously magsasalita ako ng Tagalog. What I meant was, there will be times when I'll be speaking English, but then unconsciously be speaking in Tagalog. Not only that, but remembering words and pronunciation made it harder for my peers to understand me without frustration. This is a clear representation of my struggle to communicate. This adversity made it challenging for me to express my ideas and opinions, ask permissions from teachers, and talk to my peers. In result to discrimination and language barriers, newcomers have the tendency to stick with the people in the same ethnicity as them. Not that there's anything wrong with this, but some do feel like they're obligated to stick with the people they know who they feel accepted with. Through this, it limits them from adapting and familiarizing themselves in Canadian society. and prevents them from growing. I'm not saying they should assimilate themselves, but to further their understanding of what Canadian culture is, the pros and cons, the opportunities available, as well as keeping an open mind. Because if they don't, it hurts them in the long run and affects their ability to survive. My mom once said, if you can't adapt, you can't survive. I understand what this quote means now, because once I truly understood that adapting didn't mean changing my cultural identity or oneself, but to be open to changes, I began to start a life in Canada. But even though I've adapted, differences between my culture and Canadian culture is still an obstacle I'm facing today. The drastic differences between beliefs, values, how we were brought up, have created a conflict with each other. I've noticed that Canadian culture raises their children in a more liberating environment, unlike Asian cultures who raise their children in a more strict environment. As a Filipino with strict parents, for example, I'm not allowed to go on sleepovers. Though I'm used to it, there's still this feeling of missing out of experiences and opportunities my other peers get to have. But despite all these adversities that I've talked about today, I saw my parents' ability to quickly adapt and persevere through all the hardships from the very first moments we have just moved here, and even until now. I recognize that I'm here in front of all of you today as a privilege, because my parents were willing to give up a life in their mother country to be able to strive in Canada to give their children a better future. All throughout my childhood, I saw nothing but hard work and determination from my parents. And because of them, I was able to become hardworking like them, and as well as finding my way back to my cultural heritage with pride. But despite their hard work and their determination, that alone was not enough, but with the help of the community as well. For example, the food bank played a key role in our journey because they helped us decrease our living costs so that we didn't have to struggle as bad as others. Not only that, but every time we went, we were welcomed with nothing but kindness and generosity to help shed a light for us in a foreign country. For me personally, I was able to come out of my comfort zone because of the education system. I remember I had a grade 6 teacher, and all it took from her was to encourage me about my art, and because of this, I always wanted to try new things and keep developing my skills. The education system also encouraged me to participate and stimulated my interest in community service. In result, I was able to develop skills like communication and leadership that had led me to opportunities like TEDxYouth to improve the world around me. My adversities helped me see the hospitality and generosity that defines Canadian culture for me today. This encourages me to believe that we can change the lives around us as a whole. Remember that Tag Day story I told you guys about earlier on? Well, after the man had said, he shouldn't be wearing our uniform, he's not Canadian, the group member responded with a simple yet impactful answer. He is Canadian. We also see changes in the government, for example, like the Multiculturalism Act, that is intact to protect and promote the diversity in our country. We are fortunate enough to live in a society that it's changing its views for the better. We see this with movements like the climate strikes and the Me Too movement. But even though Canada has changed, for example, to becoming more accepting to multiculturalism, there are still a lot of things to be done. Just because these problems have been addressed doesn't mean they don't exist anymore. As kids, we are told what is right and what is wrong. Our mentality is the results that are produced by people who taught us, our peers, and what society values. In the room, I see adults who are educators, parents, aunts, uncles, and even grandparents, and youth who are students, advocates, and game changers. It is our responsibility to teach and inspire each other. We can break down the stigma against multiculturalism. We can begin with promoting the diverse cultures present in our community by events like festivals or parades. This not only makes newcomers feel accepted and feel at home through representation, but as a whole, we can learn what makes each culture unique and why it's okay for each culture to exist together in one country. For example, I hosted a multicultural taste testing competition at my school because I wanted people to discover the different cultures that exist in our school through something we all love, food, as well as encourage individuals to express their cultural identity with no shame. With this, we can all begin to understand that the problems exist and realize that what we are doing is wrong and what we can do to help with it. As a society, we can begin to break down the oppression at the bottom of the iceberg because the support and empathy of the community is key into ensuring newcomers a successful future in Canadian society. Thank you.